Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tatiana Show. Today, September 5th, 2017. Pretty excited to be here with you all on the show because today we actually have Josh back with us. Hey, Josh, how's it going?
Good. I'm glad to be back. Absolutely. How are you?
Well, I'm well, thank you. What's been going on?
Well, what hasn't been going on is
off in
probably
Europe?
easier to say because Bitcoin has been out of control with the forks and we at Voltoro, because we're an exchange, there was a lot of planning and a lot of stuff to get ready for the hard fork that happened, and then figuring out how to deal with all that and make sure all our users' funds are safe is always taking the most conservative approach moving forward. But yeah, it's been an amazing trip through crypto land, as it always is. I mean, geez, I honestly, Tatiana, I feel like I'm living in a sci-fi novel.
Okay, about sci-fi novels, do they figure out what they're going to do with the nuclear war that's impending, or no?
No, don't worry too much. Make love, not war.
All right, fine.
And use crypto.
What do you think of this ICO news?
The more we defund this whole apparatus that has access to these ridiculous tools.
What do you think of the Chinese banning ICOs? Do you think that's able to even be done?
Look,
I don't know. What would they do in order to stop it?
And this is the thing. Why certain things needed the blockchain is the reason why money was the first application of blockchain technology was because it's illegal just to mint your own money. And so what we're seeing here is, which I think is a ridiculous law, because minting a currency, you should be able to try and compete. And we find monopolies abhorrent in every other part of our lives in society, but somehow with money, we've accepted that the state can have a monopoly on currency. But anyway, it is like that. And that's why Satoshi Nakamoto invented Bitcoin, was because it needed a way to decentralize something that was needed but was still illegal. And ICOs are an interesting thing because now people are able to fund projects, and I think it's a wonderful way of funding. It means that the little guy can have a go at actually investing in some of these amazing startups. Of course, there's a lot of scams and there's a lot of craziness, but the fundamental concept of an ICO is great. And I think China coming in, I think generally if I look at their past, what they do is they come in and they shut everything down, and because everyone's such a, they just follow what the state says of it, there's a boom, they shut it down, and then they come back and they just want to define regulations. So I think what's going to happen is it won't stay illegal for long. It'll come back because, I mean, the whole definition is so broad. What is an ICO? I mean, there's so many different types because it's programmable money. So, we have coins that are utility tokens. So actually, it's just software. You're selling software, and so I don't see how that can be made illegal. But anyway, it's an interesting.
Well, we're gonna find out. I sold some of my Ethereum in fear. I was one of those people that heard the news on Facebook, and I was like, sold a couple of my Ethereums. I've been playing around with different cryptocurrencies lately, buying different stuff, so that's kind of fun.
Yeah. I mean, I've like you, I've been a bit of a Bitcoin maximalist my whole time, but there are some really, really interesting projects. I find IOTA to be absolutely fascinating. It solves a lot of the scaling issues of Bitcoin, and
I thought you were going to buy me some IOTA, and then you never did. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, you Americans have a hard time because all these exchanges are blocking you. Yeah.
Well, I've been very frustrated with Poloniex because I sent a bunch of Steam there, and they've had it locked up for over a month and a half.
Oh, that's nice of them.
Yeah, I just find it outrageous because it's a lot of money. It's not, like a couple $100. It was a fair amount of Steam, and to have that all tied up in Poloniex. Normally, I mean, I was just going in there to sell it in and sell it out and take it right out, but they've just been holding it hostage. So if you work at Poloniex, or somebody there, tell them that they suck and they need to get it together.
Yeah, definitely.
so
So
frustrated with technology. I hate it. It's supposed to make everything easier, and like in my experience, my short experience in the tech space, it's done nothing to make my life easier. I feel like every time, what is it, like you find one problem, another problem pops up, like those like the little Russian dolls.
oh, totally, totally. It's a false economy. So who have we
Um,
got on the show today? We've got some amazing guests.
I'm quite excited because Colin was able to make it. He was running a little bit. We're going to have to do the show with Scott Nelson of Sweetbridge. But we've also got Colin here who's doing the Nexus Conference with me out in Aspen. So we'll be talking a little bit about the conference and about Nexus. But first, I want to bring Scott on of Sweetbridge because he's going to tell us about supply chains. Now, I know nothing about supply chains. So hopefully Scott's going to teach us about this because to me, I thought supply chains seems like it would be something that you can make a lot of money streamlining, not something that seems like I'm going to understand what's happening. So, Scott, can you please tell me what exactly is Sweetbridge going to do to help revolutionize the supply chain industry? Welcome to the
simple.
show.
Thank you. But to your point about technology, we're going to make it simple.
Well, that's, you know what? I've been hearing a lot of these promises in the crypto space so far.
Well, we may deliver. We may deliver. We'll have to see. You can be the judge. How's that?
I like it. I will. Well, I'm a very good judge.
So what is a supply chain?
So the easiest way to think about it is it's Mother Nature or it's the supply chain.
Okay.
Everything you have, everything you use came to you through a supply chain or it was grown or created where it is.
So what does a supply chain mean? Like, isn't that sort of like the iPencil concept, right? Is that not one person made a pencil, it's made of multiple things. And how did the pencil get from, you know, the forest where they got the wood and the guy who mined the graphite or whatever?
Yeah, that's the idea. You know, none of the products we have today are created right where we live. And they're built by many people that do many different things, and they go through a web. It's really more a network. It's, you know, it's called a supply chain, but it's really more a network. It's very similar to the internet. You have all these hubs on the internet that basically route packages. Well, packets of data. You have the same thing in a supply chain or a supply chain network, which is a whole bunch of different parties who produce goods or services that are used by other parties who produce goods and services. They're used by other parties and finally end up with a pencil in a store that you buy.
And we've gotten so good as humans with these supply chains that we're you know, if we the middle class lives better than any king or queen has ever lived before because of the amazing global network that's built up of supply chains to enable me to the average Joe to, you know, have caviar from some exotic country sitting in my fridge at any moment or whatever, you know. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and that's changed a lot in the last couple decades, but they're amazingly inefficient at the same time. So over the last 50 years, the average utilization of assets in the supply chain, that's factories, trucks, warehouses, whatever you want, has fallen from 90% to under 75%. And so we're becoming, we get more and more choice and we have a lot more products and the pace of everything is changing and becoming faster and faster. But our supply chains are becoming less and less and less efficient. And then a greater and greater percentage of the cost of a product now is going to actually financing cost. So when you buy that pencil, you might be paying, you know, 20 cents of the price of the box of pencils just in financing fees for the parties involved.
What does that mean? So if you want to build, going with the pencil thing, if you want to have a business that makes pencils, you need to get some money in advance from the bank because you need to buy the things in order to make it, that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, it starts with the people that grew the trees. You know, they had to own the land that had the trees and they had to grow, right? So they had to get big. And, you know, they don't make pencils by chopping down, you know, old forests. They make them out of trees that they grow specifically for making pencils. And these are relatively fast growing trees, but somebody has to buy that land, grow those trees. Then somebody has to harvest the trees, mill the trees. You have to cure the wood from parties. You have to transport this stuff. All the people along this process have a time from when they deliver the service or produce the good to when they make money. And they have to borrow that money from somebody, and people charge rent for borrowing money. And that rent is known as interest. And if you're in a part of the world where, it's not a big industrial area where a lot of these things actually start out in their life, your price or cost of money is very high. And then when you get invoices that you invoice your customers, it's not like when you walk into a store, Tatiana, and buy that dress. You had to pay for that when you bought it, right? You had to give them a credit card or whatever. In supply chains, it doesn't work that way. Somebody says, well, send me the dress or the pencil, and then I'll pay you 60 days later. And that happens over and over and over again.
Sometimes they don't pay on time. That much I know.
Right. They don't pay on time, and frequently it's because they aren't being paid on time. Because ultimately they're working with somebody like Walmart who's got the pencils, or Tesco or some big outfit, and they tell their suppliers, if you want to sell to us, then we want payment terms of 90 days, 120 days. These are not uncommon. And all this increases the cost of everything. So we have a solution, which is kind of radical, which is why don't we just make it cost nothing? What if it was free?
See, that's where you lose me, right? What do you mean if it was free? How does that work in a case by case sort of thing? Do you know what I mean? Okay, so how do you mitigate that? Are people lending through this platform?
No.
Okay, so tell me from the beginning.
Sure. So one of the things we learned about cryptocurrency from Bitcoin is that you can create a currency out of nothing. Bitcoin is backed by an algorithm, and it's our trust in that algorithm that causes it to be worth something. So for 4,500 years, banks created banknotes, and those banknotes were backed by property, your next year's crop, something of value. And in the United States, for example, in the 1880s, there were over 4,000 currencies in regular circulation.
In the U.S.?
In the U.S. They were called banknotes. They were called banknotes. And you got them by going down and giving the bank the title to your farm, or promising them next year's crop, or giving them some shares in your business. That's how you got the banknotes. So you gave the bank collateral, and then you could get the banknotes, and then you could spend those with local suppliers and farmers and people to provide for yourself. Well, you can do the same thing with cryptocurrency. You can use the blockchain's ability to enforce a set of rules to lock up an asset on a blockchain, and then create a currency that is equal to some portion of the value of that asset, and then give that to people. And since you didn't rent that money from anybody, you created it, just like a central bank creates money. You don't have to charge interest for it.
So
you can...
You are basically tokenizing your inventory and spending the token on that. Is that correct?
That's correct. But it's not just inventory. It could be the facility, it could be the equipment that you have, it could be the receivables that you have. Anything that is an asset of value. It could even be your reoccurring stream of revenue.
And how do you stop double spending? So if
same way the blockchain does. I mean, that's what the blockchain allows you to do. So what you have to be able to do is you have to be able to lock up the asset in the real world, inside of national economies, inside of legal jurisdictions. You have to lock the asset, and then you have to be able to put it on the blockchain. So this is exactly what people like London Mint Gold are doing with gold. It's exactly what's happening with Pink Diamond and what they're doing. They're doing it for commodities. It's exactly what different folks that are doing this for energy or for oil are doing, is they're locking up the asset in the real world and then creating a digital token that represents that asset that you can trade on the blockchain. Well, anything you can tokenize and put on the blockchain, you can basically treat as a collateral, and you can then create money from that collateral, taking the value, a portion of the value of that asset, and distributing it to people. And as long as you know that the blockchain will enforce the sale of that asset if the party doesn't fulfill their contract, their repayment term to pay themselves back, you don't need a third party. You don't need an intermediary.
So are you guys building the protocol to deal with all this? Is it a protocol or a platform? Centralized.
It's both. So it is a protocol, but it's also a platform, because we'll actually also have fiat bridges, which are really more like commodity bridges that will allow you to take commodities from the real world and then bring them onto the blockchain and lock them up legally in legal jurisdictions.
So are you guys doing this in the United States? Like, how do you get people to Well, first, yeah. Is there a lot of regulation around building something like this?
Oh yeah, there's lots of, the beauty is there's tons of regulation. And a lot of people are scared of regulation. We love regulators. Regulators create clarity, they create all sorts of bureaucracy and other kinds of things that make it so that organizations like ourselves can do what we're trying to do. So we're not afraid of regulation at all. We actually think it's a good thing, and we want to actually use the weight and bureaucracy of regulation to change the behavior of it so that we can use its inefficiency in the real world to be replaced by efficiency in the digital world, which, if there wasn't a big difference between those two, people wouldn't be willing to invest in and make the change. They just stick with the system as it is.
So how do you deal with, because a lot of regulation is around KYC. So if someone makes an instrument of something and tokenizes it, it becomes valuable. And I know that SEC and stuff are starting to open their eyes to a lot of this stuff. How do you deal with KYC? So if you tokenize something and you send the token, then you don't really have control of where people send this. And I know other people like Anthem Gold and stuff, they're trying to tokenize gold. And I still have the same issue with tokenizing gold because of, we're a Bitcoin gold exchange. We created a token years ago for the gold, but never released it because of just, this was one of the reasons that once we can KYC the initial buyer, but if they decide to then send it to Mr. X, we don't have any idea. And if Mr. X then does a crime and that's the proceeds of the crime, then we could maybe be held liable because as part of that, even though we didn't know what's happened, because we're helping secure the actual physical value in a vault. And so, sorry, there's a lot wrapped into that, but basically KYC, and how do you deal with that?
Well, you have to deal with KYC and AML, and because you could also have, somebody who's committing a crime using a process like this to, launder money. And the way you do it is you basically say, okay, I'm actually going to be a money services business in the full sense of the word of what the US government defines that as, and same with the other legal jurisdictions, and I'm just going to buck up and do KYC and AML. That's
so
how
you guys
do it.
are taking that on?
We're taking on more than that. We're going to take on tax compliance.
But if someone sends a token to a random person,
yep,
because it's a protocol, what happens then? Because you can do AML KYC with the first person, but if they decide to then send that token on,
so it
needed,
it really becomes, so once something is in, there's two kind of types of trading in our world. One is in network and one's out network. So if you're in network, we assure that all the parties are KYC AML. And we do that because we have something called a settlement bus that basically does a lot of the things that banks and credit card companies would typically do. One of the things it does is it enforces trading within business networks, so networks that are common in commerce between parties that know each other and therefore have full KYC and AML. And that are relatively easy to document and justify. So in that world, there's no problems because you're dealing with suppliers that you work with all the time, or you're dealing with people that you work with over and over and over again.
Gotcha.
And the more the network grows, the easier it is to basically vet everybody because one party or another is already vetted, and then you have less and less and less work to do as the thing gets bigger. But then you have out of network, and so you're right. You can't prevent somebody who basically takes a tokenized asset and puts it on a blockchain, say London Mint Gold, and you can't prevent somebody from transferring that to somebody who then transfers it to somebody else, unless you have something called a whitelist. So we have both in-network and out-of-network restrictions on tokens, and in-network tokens cannot be transferred without without the other party being KYC AML. And it depends on the legal jurisdiction you're in and the compliance you want as an entity, because the liability actually becomes the party who is the second sender in the scenario that you just illustrated. So if you're a big business, if you're Walmart or you're Apple or you're some big business, you really want to make sure that that doesn't end up in some terrorist hands, right? So you want to force everybody in your network to be in network. But if you're just an individual buying something or working with something, you might not. And so that burden becomes the party who ultimately makes that further transaction. And at that point, we can't assure KYC and AML, but we don't. That party who made that trade had to declare themselves out of network, and so you can enforce all the AML restrictions and governmental reporting requirements to report the trade to the government related to who actually got it and then sent it on. Where it went from there, you don't control, and that happens today. So if somebody sends some money to a company in Europe to buy some supplies from them that they're going to sell in, let's say, Singapore, that company's liability related to KYC and AML end at the point it paid that supplier in Europe. In fact, that supplier then turns around and gives it to somebody they shouldn't. They don't have any liability for that.
So will they need to be a money transmitter as well, the second party? I mean,
well,
licensing.
So it depends on the legal jurisdiction, right? So in some legal jurisdictions, you have to be a commodities trader, because what you're dealing with would be a commodity. In other legal jurisdictions, you would have to be a money services business, and in other legal jurisdictions, you would have to be nothing. It just depends on where in the world you are.
Yeah.
Doesn't really make it that accessible for the average person then, because like how do you see this playing out in terms of adopting it? Like where are your first use cases and how does it gain utility? And then if people are an average business, it wants to participate, don't they run into the issues that Josh just described? I mean, they're
well, those are multiple
maybe
questions.
not going to be that savvy, right?
Yeah, so they don't need to do any of this. We do it all for them. And that's what happens today through their bank. Their bank does all this for them today. And
Okay.
it's one of the valid services that banks provide people. So it is a good service that banks provide. I would argue. There'd be those who would argue it's not, but I think it's a good service that banks provide. I mean, if I'm Nike, I don't want to find out that the party that I'm working with is, in the slave trade. And is
Right.
using, the process of me using them as a customer, as a supplier, to be, doing something that could hurt my brand, right? So I don't want that. So in business activities, business networks, they're very concerned about these things. They consider it a risk factor to work with people that might turn out to be doing something dirty. So that's not seen as a bad thing at all. But even in people, there's a lot of bad press that's been given to Bitcoin and to the cryptocurrency market because of its early use by, Silk Road and other kinds of perceived illegal activities. And though that might have been overstated or overhyped in terms of what the problems were, there is a perception in most people who are in just the general populace today, and we've actually done focus groups to test this, that cryptocurrency is connected with crime. And this is just not true, but it's not true not because it isn't that it's true some of the time, it's just not true most of the time. And so if it's not true most of the time, then our feeling is, why should it be a problem if you have to basically, register? You have to do that to use Coinbase or to use any kind of, exchange anyway. They have to do KYC AML. So why is it a problem if we do it? We don't think it will be. We did a bunch of focus group studies with user groups to see whether they thought it would be a problem. And the general answer came back, it's not. It's only a very, very small percentage of the population that really wants to be able to keep their identity secret and doesn't want the government to know what they're doing. And for those people, there are solutions. They're just not going to be on our network.
What happens if all this economy starts? It's a massive economy.
Yeah, it's $54 trillion of global trade.
Right. It's you were saying before the show, 1/3 of all.
Two-thirds of GDP, global GDP, which is
chain.
profit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Supply
So
chain.
that's amazing. Now, what happens if this whole economy is going? It's all working on Sweetbridge stuff. Now, what happens if you as a company go, mismanage and go broke or something? What happens to that economy?
A great question. So there's multiple answers to that. First, the protocol, which basically makes all this work, is an open protocol. It's controlled by a nonprofit foundation in Switzerland. It's not just there because of concerns for governmental regulations. There because the Swiss are really serious about nonprofit organizations. That's one place in the world where you can write a charter for a nonprofit organization, and the Swiss government actually audits whether you follow the charter. If you do that in the United States, nobody audits it. And it's also one place in the world where you can create a foundation where you can't change the charter. So in the United States, you couldn't do that. That's why we're in Switzerland. It's because we're concerned about this exact issue. So that part of the protocol and the business would basically continue because it's not controlled by anybody. It's the foundation is just there to see that the protocol is advanced, much like the Unix Foundation, is there just to see that Unix continues to be developed. And then the businesses that exist are for-profit entities that are in different legal jurisdictions, and each of them is independent. So one could fail or be shut down by a government or whatever, and all the others would keep running. And this is by design. So it's by design to both isolate the network from failure, and it's a way of distributing and decentralizing what otherwise has to be centralized because of government regulation. And so by having multiple entities that literally can compete with one another, you also get over time competition and health in the network that happens because people will actually go to where the fees are the lowest, right? Yeah. And then if you're a member of the foundation, in order to use the protocol, the foundation forces you to basically operate with no fees. And that's done through a license that is controlled by patents that we've filed that control the technology so that we can ensure that banks or other entities don't actually take this technology and use it for their own profit, but use it for what its intended purpose is, which is to help the world.
Okay, so you're doing preemptive. Well, there's a word for it. What's the word for when you patent something, you protect it?
It's a it's a poison pill, is what it's referred to by patenting it and then giving it away for free. You basically make it so that somebody can't, break the claim of the patent, and then you have to fight them in court to basically, sue them for it. Since you're not making any money from it, what does it matter? But you can then prevent them from using it, and the community can go after people that, don't do the right thing.
So what's the timeline and the trajectory for the project right now? Because I know you guys are doing an ICO coming up soon, but like how far have you gotten with it, and what's like how are you going to get other people to use it?
Well, we're
with
a massive,
like banking institutions.
So we have all sorts of alliances that we have been building to basically make this happen. First, you should know that we are a massive project. We have 22 full-time contributors to the project right now, and about 40 part-time contributors. We have advisors that include ex-Federal Reserve economists. I'm not gonna go over too well with this crowd, but keep it moving. The point is that this is not a small project, and this is a very big project. And it's being led by people that have been there and done that.
Yeah, they've printed money out of nowhere for years. They've been there, done that.
They have. They have, and they freely admit it. They know they have. and they think the system is broken too. It's odd, talking to them. I was initially thinking they would think, oh, this is a bad idea. We've got a whole bunch of economists that we've talked to, and mostly what we get is excitement and interest because they see an opportunity to experiment with ideas they've had about how to fix things, but they can't convince the governments that they're part of to risk the kinds of things that we can risk and try in this new crypto space. And they've been talking in some cases for 100 years about better ways to do the economy. But they haven't been able to
just dismantled the Fed. That would have been fine. I would have gone for that. They've had 100 years. It's been failing the whole time. It hasn't been doing well. Sometimes you got to call it quits, guys. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's really cool. You can get people from different backgrounds. Because as much as I joke about people in the Federal Reserve, which I will never relent in that, but I'm sure that they've learned some things along the path that normal people don't necessarily consider when trying to say, let's just knock all these people out of here and just end the Fed.
Well, the thing is, the Fed is, it's not really the people in the Fed. The Fed problem is a systemic problem.
Yes.
The system is inherently just wrong, and it doesn't matter who you put in there. It's just a messed up debt-based system.
It's like any major bureaucracy. The people that work for the bureaucracy frequently know it's broken, but they don't have the power to change it. And there's a lot of fear. I mean, particularly the U.S. economy. I mean, the U.S. dollar is the basis of all global trade. So if you get it wrong, if you do something and mess up something, it could have just massive consequences. I mean, it could start wars. It could cause lots of people to be out of jobs. And so there's a fear that changing anything is super high risk. And there's part of that that's right. And part of it is just wrong. You know, it just perpetuates the failures that have happened in the past. But what we get to do now is we get to try something new, and we can do it without government support. To your point, Josh, we get to do this in a way where we get to try something different, and we can do it commercially. And that's one of the powerful things about the blockchain, is that we can now try things that before would have required governments to enforce and laws to enforce. But all we have to do is write some smart contracts, and then we can see how it works.
Yeah,
that's great.
Isn't that great? I've often said that on the show too. You know, in the past you needed gulags to enforce new economic theory.
Yes.
And now you can just try a different coin or a different blockchain with some different smart contracts, and you can see if the market actually finds value in that. And it's just amazing.
So, Tatiana, you asked a question I didn't fully answer, and that was, how do you get adoption? Well, let me make it personal to you. So you have that Ether, you've got some alt tokens maybe, and you have some Bitcoin probably?
Yep, Bitcoin girl.
Yeah, so what if you didn't have to sell it to extract the value out of it and use it?
That would be great. Didn't I just make double the money? What did you invent, Bitcoin Cash? What's going on?
That's exactly what we're going to be able to do. And that's what our very first product is you can take, initially, the very first proof of concept product that we're releasing is a ability to take any ERC20 token that we've chosen to support, and you'll be able to borrow money from that without selling it, and you can convert it into fiat if you want. You can use it to buy another alt token if you want. So that new ICO you wanted to get in on because you think it might be great, or you're just a speculator who wants to get in for the first 30 days and then dump, whatever it is, you don't have to sell your Ether to do that. You just borrow the money basically from yourself, from assets you already own on your phone without any paperwork, no credit checks, and you basically take that money and invest it into buying the new token you wanted. Then you can pay yourself back, or if the value of the new token goes up and you decide, well, that's better than owning the Ether and you want to get rid of your debt, you just sell off some of your Ether and pay off your debt. Or if you decide you want to pay it off slowly, you do, just using fiat or whatever you want to do. Or you wait and see which one rises and which one falls, and make your call from there.
So how do you, sorry, I was just trying to take a step back. How do you, like, I'm guessing you lock up the Ether in a smart contract.
That's correct.
Right?
Yep.
So it's locked up, and you basically then tokenize that and spend that somehow, but it's locked up, and then you need to get it back, those tokens back into the smart contract to get your Ether back. Right? So
it's really simple. We have different, it's called Bridge Coin, that are in different currencies. US dollars will be the very first one. You would take your Ether on the day that we lock it in the smart contract, it gets valued, and you get a certain percentage of that. That percentage is controlled by a board of governors who controls what the value of the asset is based on how volatile it is and its trading history and how many exchanges it's on and that kind of stuff. Then let's say it's 50%. You get 50% of that you can take out, pegged to the US dollar on that day based on the value of the Ether. You get that many bridge coin, which are denominated in US dollars. You can then do whatever you want with it. Let's say you got 100 bridge coin. All you have to pay back later is 100 bridge coin. And bridge coin are pegged to currencies with different market drivers that basically make them stay close to the value of that currency. It won't be exactly the same as the value of the currency, but they should stay very close to it. And that means that you can then use that money to go do something else. Maybe charge up a credit card, whatever you want to do with it, and then pay it back over time whenever you want. Or if you decide, just to authorize the smart contract to sell off some of your digital asset and pay back the loan for you. Then the obvious questions are, well, what happens if the value diminishes of your token to that you put in as collateral? Well, we have it's like a margin call type thing. We call it a sell line. If your collateral drops below that line, the system will automatically settle your debt by selling off your asset. We do give you a notice before that. So you get a notice if you want it in advance. So you could have put some more collateral in your vault, or you could have paid off some of your debt or whatever. And all of this is done with you doing everything. So you loan yourself money off your assets and you set your payment terms.
Okay. Okay. And because the Ether goes up in value, you want it to go up in value, let's say, and you pay back the loan, let's say it's 100 bridge coin, which equals one Ether or whatever.
Yeah.
$100. Okay. And those $100 are pegged. How are those $100 pegged to the bridge coin?
So the bridge coin uses market drivers, a set of different market making functions to basically make it always worth close to $1. So if you're familiar, are you familiar at all with how some of the different stable coins work that use market makers?
I mean, I know like Tether, for instance, always promises a company to pay back $1, so there's no real arbitrage. There's some arbitrage ops there.
So this is different than Tether. So in Tether's case, every dollar that they have in a tethered dollar token is backed by $1. In this case, we use the collateral that is in the system, and we use the ability for people who are market makers to make money off of selling when the price of a bridge coin goes below $1. They buy up the excess bridge coin in the market, and then when it goes above $1, they basically sell it off. And they do this in trading platforms through our exchanges, and they actually make money by doing that. And then we have a token that people could buy called Sweetcoin, which is a limited circulation token. There'll only ever be 100 million of them. And what you get if you own a appropriate amount of it, depending on the activity you're doing, then you get all of these services interest-free and service-free. So even moving in and out of fiat, between fiat and crypto, is free.
Well, it sounds fascinating. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. I've got so many more questions.
Well, maybe when you guys are launching, we'll be able to bring you back on. So really quickly, what's the timeline for people who want to pay attention with the project, and where can they go to find out more?
So they can go to our website, sweetbridge.com, and register on the website. We'll basically notify you as updates and changes occur. And then the official date of our ICO hasn't been announced yet, but it will be in starting in October for US buyers. And then moving around the world from there.
Follow the sun.
Follow the sun.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Scott, for joining us. It was really good chatting, and I don't know. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. I'm gonna put my money on there and just borrow from myself. It sounds like a very useful, useful method
Well,
Be your own bank
Sweetcoin is the
again.
one token you
of
never want to sell.
self-finance.
That's right.
Very funny. I like that. All right. Well, it was really great having you on. Our next guest is Colin Cantrell from Nexus. And what's cool about Colin is that he is throwing what I consider to be one of the coolest crypto conferences, mainly because Ron Paul is going to be there. And I love Ron Paul. I've been a really big Ron Paul fan since 2012, or actually 2011. Well, 2008. But anyway, it's really neat to see a crypto conference where he's speaking, because it's sort of, I mean, Ron Paul has always been a big supporter of cryptocurrencies, you know, with varying levels of enthusiasm as it became more obvious that this wasn't going to go away. But to have him at this conference, I think it's going to be really cool. We've got Judge Napolitano, Jesse Ventura. Josh, I told you already, you're missing out.
I'm totally missing out, man. You're reeling off these names.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be singing. Jordan Page is going to be performing. My friend Johnny is going to be performing too. Lynn Ulbricht's going to be speaking, and a whole bunch of really interesting people. Rob from Zencash is going to do a talk. Ari from Storm Token. We've been working with both Storm and Zencash at Crypto Media Hub, so that's kind of neat to kind of get to hang in person.
Definitely.
But it's September 21st to the 23rd in Aspen. And Colin, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Congrats for putting together such an amazing lineup. If only someone had helped suggest some people.
Yeah, it just kind of started small, and we were just like, let's throw a conference for this. And then it kind of grew into what it is now, which is pretty incredible to see. I'm pretty excited to see everything come together as it is.
Cool. Are you based out in Colorado where the conference is, or no?
No, so I'm out in Tucson, or actually, sorry, I'm between Tucson and Phoenix. I'm in Arizona, actually. So we decided to do Aspen just because it's such a beautiful place, and just turned out we got the Aspen Institute rented out. So we're gonna do a lot of music performances. Like, I'm kind of calling it like the Woodstock of the modern age. We're trying to bring that music together too, because I'm a musician as well as I'm a programmer and kind of a Renaissance man guy into a bunch of different things. And it's just so I think music is a very, very important part of everything, and it's a very, very important part of uniting people together. And I see that there's a lot of, how should I say it, even in crypto, there's a lot of uncertainty in the world. Are we going into a war? Are we gonna have economic collapse? And the world really needs to just, you know, come together and work together and find these solutions to all these problems, and kind of have a common way to do that. And that's Nexus means a connection between two or more things. So, I mean, there's all the technology that I build that backs that up, but it makes it happen in a more efficient way so that we can have more of that. But I mean, this conference is one of those too, it's bringing together a very diverse variety of people. And, you know, you always know what happens when you bring a lot of really brilliant people together. You bring a lot of people from different walks of life, and then throw a little music in there. It's going to be a pretty incredible event. It's going to be fun, and I hope it really brings people together. Like, that's my big hope in it, is like, you know, hey, we're all not so different. We got a world to fix. Let's get together, do it, and enjoy it. Let's talk some crypto. Let's talk some music. Let's bring these minds together, and let's figure some things out, and let's say what we've all figured out and put those together.
Well, you've
make it into something that much better.
Definitely chosen some great minds. I'd love to hear what Ron Paul has to say about crypto nowadays. I mean, it's been a while, and I know right at the start he was like umming and ahhing, you know. But unlike Peter Schiff, he's actually able to change his opinion with new information.
Oh yeah.
So.
Well, it's kind of
Peter Schiff's coming to the conference, I think.
Yeah. I was just.
I've got nothing
Ron Paul earlier too. Schiff is coming too. Yeah, we're bringing Peter Schiff.
Well, he was hardcore anti for a while. It's like, hey, come on, Peter.
Well, he still is. But why don't we bring some people together and see what happens? It'll be a hell of a debate. Max Kaiser's going to be there too. They always have a little good debate. You know, we'll see if we can help him realize the potentials of it. So it's going to be fun. Like, yeah.
I think Max is already, he's been sold on crypto for a long time.
Oh yeah. and he's going to be there. So it's going to be fun to see kind of what evolves from it all. Because I mean, you can't just you can't expect an idea to be strong unless you have people, for lack of better words, attack it, or have, you know, adversarial opinions, or people that say, well, gold does this and I like it for this. Well, hey, how can we make crypto do that for you? You know, gold cures cancer. Well, why can't we have, you know, sort of third-party gold reserves that people can exchange for gold? Why can't you exchange gold for crypto? There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing stopping people from doing it. It's just a value storage mechanism. It's more efficient. It's more liquid, and it can move faster. And then you don't have to carry weight of gold across. Like the reason they got China.
It's exactly what we do. We allow people to trade in and out of gold and Bitcoin, allocated to your name.
So
insured,
like, what's wrong with it? Why can't they both be good for their own purposes? Like, gold's awesome, so's silver, and so's crypto. Like,
yeah, I hear people all the time say, "Bah, gold's finished," or I hear gold bugs. Crypto, it's just a tulip. And I just think,
like,
guys,
what about them working together?
Yes,
they work together. Thank you. Like, can't we all just like figure out that we all have some good ideas, and then if we combine the ideas together, nobody's wrong and nobody's right, but we're like, hey, crypto's good for this and gold's good for that. I mean, people need to have something in their hand too, man. That's something good for gold, for the old time. Like, they want to know, hey, here it is. Well, here's this value storage mechanism that you can take to a Bitcoin gold shop and turn it into Bitcoin, and then transport that Bitcoin across the world, and somebody else can get gold on the other side. I mean, beautiful. People can do whatever they want with value storage, and you can exchange whatever property you want for it. And that's the beauty of decentralization. Yeah, man. That's what it's all about.
You guys are very rowdy.
Oh, I'm a passionate individual, man. I've been in this since 2013, so this is it's seen a lot of things happen, and I guess that's the best way I can say it.
Well, tell me something. I want to know what's the space angle going on with this conference, because your dad is a spaceman. I'm sure that he has a better title than that, but that's what I'm calling him. I think it sounds kind of retro. Tell me, are we sending anybody to the moon from the Nexus Conference? I have a couple suggestions.
No. We're not getting that far yet. But
okay.
I guess I can just say it like this: 60 miles or 100 kilometers up, you know, and low Earth orbit's about 90 miles to 100 miles. So above 60 miles is international. Nobody owns it, right? So by having satellites up there, we're distributing this technology even further. We're running this disruptive technology that is disrupting these central banks that obviously are not too happy about it. And we're running on their rails. We're running on their ISPs. We're running on their hardware. And so we're going to be putting these satellites up. So the way the story kind of comes together with my dad is, I've been talking about, you know, we're going to build satellite internet and everything. He's like, well, hey, not to get you down, but Elon's on that. I'm like, oh, no, we'll beat Elon to it. Like, whatever. Because we go back. I mean, I guess I just unknowingly grew up in the aerospace industry. So Carl Sagan was a friend of the family. I grew up meeting Bill Nye the Science Guy and Buzz Aldrin and all of them. And, you know, intermittently, I kind of ran into Elon Musk when he wanted to find out, you know, how to build rockets. He went to Lou Friedman, the Planetary Society, and he was like, hey, I want to send mice to Mars. And he's like, oh, contact Jim Cantrell. And then my dad got John Garvey and a couple other people, and they flew out to Russia. Long story short, Russians got drunk, and they said, oh, get out of here, boy. We don't sell you ICBM. And he said, okay. So they're on the airplane, and they're just like, oh, what's Elon doing over there on his computer? And he's like, guys, I got it. We can do this. We can build our own rockets. They're like, yeah, right, Elon. And Garvey's like, no, man, we need to build microsat launchers. Elon's like, no, we're going to do this. So they're like, okay. So, I mean, they worked together for a year or two, and then my dad kind of was like, eh. And Garvey started working on this design for a small microsat launcher, because satellites, as we know, they're hundreds of millions of dollars. They're the size of cars, 1,000 kilograms. They're these big, giant, overcomplicated messes of like computers were back in the 50s. Well, we're not in that age anymore. Transistors are incredibly small, and we can pack a lot of them together. And so there's these things called cube satellites. They're about 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters, right? That's a 1U anyway. And they've been existing for a while, but the production time of cube satellites has gone down while the launch time has gone up, because they couldn't get a ride, and there was no dedicated company to launching these cube satellites. So John Garvey and my dad just teamed up, I think it was last year, and they're like, let's build this rocket. And I actually worked with Garvey when I was 16 back in the day, helping work on the design that's the Vector R right now. So that kind of opened up this whole door of like, well, let's not stop there. Like, let's build galactic sky up in low Earth orbit. You know, we're going to send up our Nexus sats so people can connect in. Let's build some mesh networks on the ground so that we can have a truly distributed system, not only on the software, but on the hardware. because Bitcoin can't be shut down because you have to shut down every single node in order to shut down the network. Well, you can filter IPs. You can filter through the ISPs pretty easy. I mean, it uses the same port every time. There's 4 leading bytes on every Bitcoin packet that determines that's a Bitcoin packet in order to read it from the buffer. And that's how it works. I mean, the protocol itself is kind of old school program, so it's not too hard to decode it. So there's a reason that the powers that be, whoever we call them, we just say they who don't leave us alone, they're sitting here and they're probably using it. They're probably trying to regulate it. They're trying to turn it into another banking system. And I think for us to have a truly distributed future where we're not limited by these constraints of political influence or lobbying or corporate interests or things, like, I think we all really truly deserve to be free, but I don't think we all truly know what it feels like to be free. And when you taste that freedom, like crypto, it changes everything. And then people can start raising this bar and the standard. But if we're running on their hardware, what are we going to do? So they have complete control over us. They got us by the balls. So we need to build our own hardware, and you can't bring down satellites.
I got to say, Tatiana, I haven't met too many people that are building satellites at the age of 16 or designing them anyway. So wow, Colin, jeepers creepers. So you're gonna throw up a
wait.
Because Blockstream
I've been
just
waiting
chucked up some
patiently with the
satellites.
question, and it's very important. We have to
Shoot
stop.
away.
Did we go to Mars, or was it? I'm sorry. No, I know we didn't go. Well, maybe we went there, but did we go to the moon? Did it happen? Do you think so?
Well, I think there's a lot of speculation on it. Okay, now I'm not too into like
answer.
I'm not into like putting on a tinfoil hat on a conference, but what I've kind of noticed, okay, is I think we did go to the moon, but maybe not when they said we went to the moon. That's my theory on it, because there's enough strange data to see a bit of film studies, see waving flags and things like that, and there's data pointing that way, but there's also data like we launched a damn rocket, you know, and that's on video too. So it's like, well, where did it go? Yeah, did it just orbit around and just to throw some giant sham? So I think it's the truth somewhere in between these extremes. And maybe we made it to the moon. Maybe they made it back. Maybe they didn't. Who knows? You know, maybe they found out that, oh, crap, the moon's made of cheese. For all we know, we don't know. So that's all I can really say is that. But I think the truth is out there, but it's not necessarily what these people say here, and it's not necessarily what these people say over here.
I saw this interview once with Kubrick, and I think that some other people said it was fake, but I don't know. It seemed really compelling that he was talking all about how he did it. How,
oh, yeah, that's a big fake movie. Did you watch it all the way to the end?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and it goes crazy, and then you realize it's all a big bullshit.
No, I didn't know that it goes crazy. I don't think I don't think I made it to that part.
It's so weird.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised either way, to be honest. Like with what we're finding out about the world these days, man, I would not be surprised either way.
Yeah, well, I was down with that because you know Kubrick's got his whole like eyes wide shut thing when he dies. It's like he knew too much.
No, it's called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. And it's great because I was like, what? I just accidentally turned on the telly one day and that was playing. And I was like, oh my God, this is earth shattering. And then it just keeps on getting weirder and weirder and crazier and crazier. Like, and then you just realize, oh, they're just pulling my leg.
Yeah,
Thanks
some people are just talking. Some people are, doing some things. The bottom line is like, one thing that makes science such a beautiful thing where technology is birthed from is independent verification. Even with Bitcoin, you can independently verify the data with mathematics. Well, we can't really do that. So, it's going to be who said, she said, but maybe we should just make a rocket to the moon and then we'll find out for ourselves. Yeah, exactly. See if we can go find the flight. It's easily provable. So,
there's still time before the event. I'm just saying, if you really want to impress people.
Maybe.
So
Colin, I'm not out to impress people. I'm out just that would be pretty fun, but like there's some things like I'm a little worried about this planet right now. So I got to make sure home's good before we leave it on some adventures of our own glory, I guess you could say. But for the facts, I think it would be pretty fun to go there. Who knows, man?
So tell me about the Nexus coin, because
so it's called Nexus, I guess. Some people say Nexus coin because everyone says coin, but try to make it so people know Nexus because the token's NXS. So like, it's a network in itself. So we're original. Since about 2014, I've been building it, and started it as CoinShield actually back in those days with kind of stopping all the scams. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the pump and dumps in 2014.
Right.
It's kind of like a lot of ICOs are kind of pump and dump a little bit nowadays. That's why you got to pick and choose wisely about what you invest in. But, you know, back in those days, we were trying to bring more awareness to it. So that's where it started. And it kind of evolved into Nexus over time when we started figuring how to connect all these different ideas and realized we need to decentralize the world. The whole world could use these distributed systems, not just in financial transactions, but in creating new governmental systems and creating new organizational systems, financial systems. So the technology of it powers it. I could go into all the text if you want, but basically we concentrate on security, sustainability, and scalability. Because right now blockchains don't scale. You know, Ethereum has that time of the month. Every time a big ICO comes and the network gets congested, because the blockchain was really, the architecture of it, again, it's the best way to say, is not really designed for full scalability. It's a flood network and everything. And they're starting to work on, I mean, I think Vitalik calls it fracturing, but I mean, it's really called database partitioning. But you can't really partition the whole blockchain database unless you have some form of trust. And the trust that's developed in Bitcoin or any proof of work coin like Ethereum is basically the work. So you can prove that you did this much work, and so therefore you're that much more trusted. Otherwise, you swarm the whole network with your own nodes and spam your own data, and it just becomes an insecure system. So in order for that to work properly, careful procedures. So, I mean, in a nutshell of things, like I've been putting a lot of effort into designing things to prevent quantum computing, which is a very big thing that we're having come these days. I mean, in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to start to see them. I mean, Google D-Waves are already at 2,000 qubits. From back in 2014, I was telling people about this, like, yeah, whatever. I'm like, no, the NSA just announced this year, like, they're building a quantum computer, and they're going to destroy cryptography because they don't like it. It used to be only something available to governments until Eric Young made SS Lie, and that started the whole cypherpunk revolution, which is what birthed Bitcoin. So, I mean, I guess you could say, like, if you want me to go step by step through all of the technologies, I'm happy to do that. But in a higher level overview, I'm working off of Satoshi's original code from about 2012, and I've rebuilt a lot of it and learned everything about it from what he coded. And because as a coder, you can kind of learn how somebody thinks by their logic and how they code. So I kind of learned how to think like he thought, and then figured out how to expand that forward into creating new architecture that enables these types of things to scale to worldwide volume. It allows these things to be quantum secure, and it allows it to also be, for lack of better words, like more immutable to authorities or the pyramidal type power systems where people get addicted and put to the top of something, because things need to be balanced. I mean, I'm more into a network-based society rather than a hierarchical society, but sometimes, you know, you get the development or you get the mining centralization, and there's a lot of things that I think, you know, were not foreseen by Satoshi when he initially created it that needed to be sought forward.
So blockchains have this inherent scaling issue, because basically it's one linear block chain. And
yeah, it's a one-dimensional chain.
Yeah, and something like the DAG or the Tangle in IOTA try to deal with scalability issues. And in fact, they had a button in a couple of releases ago called Spam the Network, because it actually helps the network grow, because you're doing proof of work on 2 transactions that are sitting in the network.
Yeah, they're doing proof of work per everyone, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting, and it uses Adam Back's Hashcash idea and really sort of reinvents that back into bringing that as, you know, I know Satoshi used it, but taking that power away from the miners. That also solves a lot of the centralization through mining, and well, now we see the major centralization point being the manufacturers of the ASICs. But is Nexus dealing with some of these issues as well? Or what sort of, are you guys going with proof of work or stake? Or?
Well, right now we have actually 3 mining channels. So we have one that does prime number proof of work. So it's basically searching for dense prime clusters. It's kind of a dual use, because number theorists and cryptographers can use these pseudo prime numbers that have never been found before, that are about 308 digits long. They kind of form in, I guess, tightly grouped clusters.
Remember someone?
What's that?
Was that Peercoin that did the first prime? I forgot.
No, it was actually Primecoin that did the first one, and they had Cunningham chains of the first kind and second kind, and also bi-twin chains, which is basically 2n plus 1, 2n minus 1, or it creates 2 chains as one. So that was a little bit different. We're doing dense prime clusters. So I wrote this algorithm for that, And that also, it's really very highly difficult to make an ASIC for it. I wouldn't call it ASIC resistant, but then I went to SK1024 too for the other hashing algorithm using 1024-bit outputs, which, you know, it's GPU mined right now, but eventually it will become ASIC mineable. But that's the baseline infrastructure that has been built because I've built it off of a Bitcoin style blockchain in order to transition a Bitcoin blockchain into a Nexus type chain. And so the architecture I'm developing now, I looked into IOTA a little bit and I liked the concept, but I didn't like the fact that it relies on transaction volume. Now, once it gets going, that's cool. But then the fact that they use proof of work, you know, in there, I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. But I think there's going to be different ways to do it in a way that, like, I don't know. Something about the idea I didn't like about having to have transactions in order to verify transactions. So, I mean, that works, but one thing that I'm working on is kind of, you talk about the linear blockchain. I'm working on actually a 3-dimensional blockchain. So think about it like Bitcoin is like a single sound wave, right? It's like a monotone. Now, Nexus is going to be like a multiple sound wave. So you're going to have the transactions can expand out this way and they'll refer to each other and they'll check each other. But instead of using a type of proof of work, there's a trust system that's built in where you build a track record. Now, you throw a couple prime numbers in that too if you want to have, you know, a little bit of cost, because Adam Back's Hashcash was designed to prevent email scamming. But the prime numbers work better because you get the scientific use of it. And then what you do is you have multiple levels of locks. So then you have trust locks, which is kind of a more sophisticated proof of stake system that they all agree on a lock and they weight it based on their trust. And they build trust by producing time in the network. They're using their time in the network, and using time is the cost, where you're actually proving you've spent this time on this in a way that's more energy efficient than proof of work. And then when you get to the final block interval, miners will hash on that, but they're going to hash it whatever difficulty they want, and they're going to submit shares, and they're going to weight that chain down. That's where the third dimension comes in. So, I mean, if you look at it horizontally like a sound wave, then it's going to have a third dimensional weight based on the trust from the proof of work and from the prime numbers and from the stake. And then that's going to make it impossible.
I think we've got to pull back on the technical, because I think we'll lose our audience. Not that our audience is dumb. We're just, you know, they're capable of, they're very broad, but I think
rein me in if you need.
I don't want to get just too off into the weeds, guys.
Tell me whatever level you want me to give.
Over a couple, you know, quantum computings ago. Either way, we have to wrap the show though, because the show ends in just a few minutes. But I want to invite people to the conference, but maybe I will let Colin do that. Colin, why don't you invite everybody to the conference? Why should they come? 30-second elevator pitch.
You should come to the Nexus Conference because it's your connection to the future. It's your connection into this industry of great minds, creating a think tank and coming together in order to celebrate and learn together about the future that we have to create, because the world needs change and we need to be that change. So by coming together and sharing what we are as to each other, we'll connect together and make that change together.
Yeah.
I like it. Very good.
When is it? Where is it? How much?
September 21st to the 23rd. Tickets are $500. And yeah, I don't know. It includes 3 days of conferencing, and then there's all these different activities and stuff like that. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to a couple of our sponsors. The Bitcoin CPA. Unfortunately, Kirk won't be at the Aspen event. He's makes tax and Bitcoin fun, or as fun as they can be.
Brilliant.
Holler to our friends over at Crypto Compare. I've been doing some tweets of their up-to-the-date crypto news. Holler to Ross, who's rotting away in a prison in Colorado, actually. So we'll be hearing from Lynn Ulbricht at the Nexus Conference, giving us the latest update. Unfortunately, I won't be able to visit Ross this time because I wasn't approved on the guest list yet, but hopefully soon. But he's doing well. And also, I want to send people over to Sovereign Tech and Sex and Science Hour. Those are two really great podcasts. I love those guys. My company, Crypto Media Hub, are doing marketing and PR and advertising and all sorts of fun stuff. And if you need T-shirts made, go to libertycraze.com. My friend Dana makes really cool shirts, and he's a Liberty lover if you like to support like-minded individuals. Colin, any final words for our people before we ship off? I appreciate the time. I appreciate the time on the show, and it's going to be fun to see all of you there at the conference. And I look forward to meeting everybody and continuing to grow everything. Very cool. I'm going to keep trying to get Josh to come to the United States, but I don't know if that's going to work. Thanks, everyone, for coming on the show. Thanks, Scott from Sweetbridge. You can go check out Sweetbridge's site, and then the Nexus Conference. What is it? Nexus something, and then it's /conference. What's the URL?
Nexusearth.com, yeah.
Oh,
nexusearth.com/conference.
Yeah, and you can find out all the info there. So I hope to see everybody there, and I'll be on the Tom Woods cruise in October. There's a fintech conference in Atlanta, and so yeah, if you guys want to check in with me, go to tatianamrose.com or cryptomediahub.com. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.
Thank you.
Taking off, ready for a liftoff.
Smash the like button.
Ready for liftoff. See you later, guys.
All right.